dry throat. I flew back from holiday yesterday, hence the ridiculous fan. So I will apologise because I will be coughing throughout. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening and welcome you to the annual Parish Assembly. I've been coming to these since 2012, so I've seen quite a few of these through the years. I would also like to very much welcome our guests this evening. So we have Councillor Patricia Stallard, who's our Hampshire County Councillor, and also Councillor Nick Adams-King, who is leader of Hampshire County Council, who's very kindly come along this evening to talk to us about two huge things that are happening within government, which is the local government reorganisation and also devolution. So I'm sure that people will have questions for him, so he's going to give us an update, which I also will be very interested to hear because I've been completely out of the loop for the last 3 weeks and things are changing very, very quickly, so I'm interested to hear that. So apologies for this evening. We have apologies from Debs Carson, who is unable to make it this evening, Councillor Carson, so that is noted. And then we have on the agenda the minutes of the previous assembly, which was held on the 4th of April. I'm sure everybody's read them. So we will note those minutes of the previous meeting. So without further ado, I will hand over to Councillor Nick Adams-King. Thank you. We don't know about you.
No, I don't. You can give some of my parishes a bit of some training. So hello, I am the leader of the County Council, which means that my colleagues, like Patricia, chose me last May to become leader. I represent an area called Romsey Rural, so I'm not and that runs from the junction of the M3 and the M27 in a big kind of L shape that goes along to the New Forest and then up the Wiltshire border. So I wrote that sort of thing. The other thing that I just wanted to say was that I'm very sorry about the potholes. I'm doing my absolute best to come top of them. There's a point in the year which, you know, that day in the year where they work out that you stop working to pay your taxes and then the money's yours. It's about sort of June sometime. There's a similar day in highways where the number of pothole reports is exceeded by the number of potholes fixed. And it's come a bit earlier this year because it stopped raining at last. So that's I wanted to talk to you a little bit about devolution and about local government reorganisation. You will find that the press conflate the two. Unsurprisingly, because the government do it as well. And so that becomes somewhat confusing. But before I do that, I wanted to just talk a little bit about money. Because money, as always, is really important to all of this. But more importantly, it becomes really important when we think about reorganising councils. So you will hear all sorts of reports about how the county council has major financial problems, that we are looking to make more savings because we need to balance our budget and so on. The first thing to say is that councils don't go bust. Councils don't go bankrupt. At the end of the day, we continue to do what we need to do to make sure that the roads are fixed, to make sure that those people who are most vulnerable are looked after, to make sure that our children are safe, that they are educated and so on. But it's undeniable that we have major financial challenges, and a lot of that comes down to two different things. The first is that we traditionally have had a much lower council tax in Hampshire than many other areas, and so we are effectively running to keep up all the time. The second thing, to be honest, is the amount of, or the increase in the number of people who need our help, particularly social care. And if I tell you that the best example I can give you is that every month at the moment, the number of people for whom they've been funding their care home costs themselves, and they use up all of their available money, and therefore the county council has to start paying for them. That increases by 30 a month. So that's an additional 360 people a year. Every time we increase council tax, an increase of 1% in council tax nets for the county council £8.2 million at the moment. And we put council tax up by 5% this year, which was the maximum that we could. We did ask for more, and I'll explain why we did that in a minute. But that additional 5% at 8.2 million per 1% netted us £41 million. So that additional £41 million, if you then think about those 30 people a month, so 360 extra people for whom we have to fund their care. Across the county there are 14,000 care home beds. And we, at any one time, purchase between 4,000 and 4,500 of them. So the county council is a big player in the market, and as a consequence of that, we were able to negotiate a tariff that is lower than that which you would pay if you were funding yourself. The minimum tariff that we pay is £1,000 a week. So if you add 360 people times £52,000 per person, that comes to 18.7 million. So almost half of our council tax increase is gone like that, just on those additional people. It doesn't take into account inflation, it doesn't take into account any additional children that are taken into care, it takes no notice of pay rises, and it's those kind of challenges that we have. And this year, your council tax in Hampshire, the Hampshire portion of it, if you look at the band D, which is the middle band, and they use that as the comparator generally, is £1,609, which is a lot of money. If you were in Surrey, you'd be paying £1,865. If you're in West Sussex, it's £1,837. In Oxfordshire, it's £1,911. So our tradition, we are the second lowest in the county. We're only in the country. We're only slightly higher than Essex, who are the lowest. That shows you how far behind we are. If I'm honest, at some point in all of this process, if we are to continue to be able to pay for our social care and for all of the different services that we eventually, we're all getting older, and eventually we're going to need some kind of help, I'm afraid we will have to increase council tax to a level that's more like those in our neighbours. Because if we were Surrey, we would not have any deficit in our account, in our budget. We'd actually be in surplus. So we run things very efficiently. I would say that, but genuinely we do. And that's been independently assessed to tell us that. But it also means that we have that challenge of being behind the curve with funding. So hold on to that thought when I talk about the council reorganisation, local government reorganisation in a minute. But the first thing that is happening is devolution. And devolution effectively means taking powers that are currently in Westminster and devolving them so that we make decisions about those issues locally. They tend to be really strategic things. So the items that there are 9 different areas that we're going to initially be given control over ourselves. They include skills and training. That has a big impact on how we can tackle areas of deprivation. Economic development, strategic planning, strategic transport, public transport, environment, public safety, public health, and emergency planning. So 9 different areas where, frankly, the divisions between different counties and the divisions between different districts and the divisions, the boundaries between different councils don't really matter. And the example I use is that I've got a couple of teenagers. They get on the bus in Romsey, they travel into Southampton to meet their friends. There's a point at which Hampshire are responsible for the journey and for the way in which the bus travels as easily as possible into Southampton. And then there's a point in nursing where you then transfer into Southampton, and there's a very different way of working in how that bus gets through the traffic and how it gets to Southampton. Now, my kids don't care who's looking after that journey. They just want to get to West Quay and spend my money as quickly as possible. And so there really should be no difference in how we view that, how we begin to join public transport up better, how we integrate our trains with our buses, and so on. And so it's those kind of powers that take no notice of boundaries, that go to what's going to be called the combined authority. It's the body through which devolution is operated. So in order to oversee devolution and those powers, we would need to elect a mayor, and the government were very clear when they, in their manifesto last year prior to the election, that they wanted each area of the country to have a mayor or combined authority, to have a mayor in charge of these powers, with whom they could interact, because frankly they're much keener to work with mayors than they are with people like me, leaders of councils. We could see that last year. If you remember, in the first few days of that new government, it wasn't guys like me that got invited in to go and see Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner. It was the mayors of the various authorities that are mostly in the north currently. So they've been very clear that's what they want. So what we'll be doing is electing a mayor on May the 7th next year. That mayor will cover what's called Hampshire and Solent. So the county council area, the 11 districts and boroughs that sit under it, Southampton, Portsmouth, and the Isle of Wight. And in doing so, what we'll also be doing is folding into that body, into that job of the mayor, and into the combined authority, the responsibilities of the police and crime commissioner, and also of the fire authority. So that comes under that public safety piece as well. And those bodies already have a boundary that matches that same area. The government then want the mayor to sit on something that's going to be called the Council of the Nations and Regions, or is called the Council of the Nations and Regions. It's got all the mayors from England. It's got the first ministers of the 3 devolving countries of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And one of the things that, in thinking about the area that we wanted to create, or that we needed to create to have that combined authority, they were looking for us to have a population of at least 1.5 million, because they wanted sufficient size to warrant that individual who is the mayor of that area sitting alongside those other mayors and those first ministers on that body. And we absolutely, in Hampshire and the Solent, have that critical mass. Whoever becomes the mayor will be secure in sitting alongside those people, because we have a population of 2.2 million, which is more than Northern Ireland. Our economy, measured by gross value added, it's how much we contribute to the UK economy, is almost 70 billion. That's the same as Wales. So, as an area, we absolutely, can sit knowing that we have equality with those different other parts of the country. So, we began conversations about whether we should consider devolution. I began talking to my colleagues who were the leaders of Portsmouth and Southampton and the Isle of Wight last June. We got to the point where we had a document that set out a list of asks that we wanted from the government. They came back in December and said, well, we'll cover these areas first, but we will happily then begin to look at other areas once you've elected your mayor. And if you wish to be part of the priority programme, apply for it and we'll let you know. And then we were told at the end of January that we were part of that priority programme. They want everything done by next year. And for that reason, what they also said was, in order for you to do that, we would anticipate that you should postpone your elections, your county council elections in May, which is why we don't have an election this year, and that instead we will hold them alongside the mayoral election next year. No one likes cancelling elections, and it was something that we didn't do with any sort of pleasure. But on the other hand, those 9 different areas have 58 different work streams beneath them. We've had to carry out a public consultation that finished yesterday, and all of that couldn't have happened if there was an election period starting at the end of March. So I think the prize is worth having, because ultimately this means that we get powers from Westminster locally, that we can decide upon ourselves, we can tailor those decisions to what we want for Hampshire over Solent, and we, along with that comes money. Every time there is an iteration of additional powers coming from Westminster to the mayoral authorities, they're always first in line to get those, they're always first in line to get the additional funding and additional grants from government. So therefore I think it's a prize worth having for us. The big prize, I think, is then to begin to have some kind of influence over how the NHS operates across the piece, because there are enormous savings we could make if we could make better efficiency between the way the NHS deals with people and their element of social care alongside the county councils. So for that reason, or for all those reasons, devolution for me, good thing. My personal view is it's a good thing. I wouldn't be standing here and recommending it to you if I didn't think that was the case. I think it's a positive for us. Potentially less positive is what comes with it. The government didn't say in their manifesto that they would want to reorganise all the councils. The government, however, said that if we were going to be going down this route of devolution, they also wanted to, in all of the areas where there are two tiers of local government, a county council and a district and borough councils, or in the case of Winchester, a city council underneath it, that they would want us to reorganise into unitary councils. So unitary councils being those that cover everything within one council, same as Portsmouth, same as Southampton. So when we began that conversation, the two leaders of Portsmouth and Southampton said, can we stay as we are? We don't want to change. And the government minister that we were talking to said, no, you are both too small, you need to be bigger. And they're asking councils to look at areas of around 500,000 people as an ideal area that we want councils to cover. And that's based upon a sense that 500,000 is a critical mass of people that would enable you to be able to run services at scale. So the other one said, well, can we stay on our own? And they went, oh, maybe. So that's a positive in the sense that I can't really see a council that would have the island as part of the mainland necessarily being one that would easily work. And then, so I said, well, you know, the county has almost 1.5 million people. Would we be able to stay as one unit? And they said, no, you're too big. So we've begun this journey of beginning to talk about local government organisation. We were asked to put in our initial thoughts on the 21st of March. Those have been put forward. There were no boundaries put on maps. There was no decision put forward as to how many councils there should be. And we then have to make a final submission on the 26th of September. So the 15 councils, the island, the 2 cities, the county council and the 11 districts and boroughs have all begun that conversation, and it's fair to say that there are very different views in the room. You would think if we're aiming at 500,000 people, there are 2.2 million people in the area, 150,000 of them on the island are going to stay separate, so that leaves us with roughly 2 million, and we've got to aim at 500,000. That should mean 4 councils, shouldn't it? And that should be easy peasy. And it's not at all because of the different sizes of the different pieces of geography. So Portsmouth's got 210,000 people, Southampton has 260, the biggest district is Basingstoke and Dean, which has about 190,000 people. The smallest one is Gosport with 80. Can Gosport go with anybody but Fareham? No, because they're completely surrounded by Fareham. Can Havant go with anybody but Portsmouth? Probably not, because most of the boundary between Portsmouth and the county area is that one between Havant and Portsmouth. Can we split up districts to be able to make completely new lines on maps. We could, and the government haven't said no, but the process for doing that is far more complicated. It means that they need to involve the Boundary Commission and they need to introduce primary legislation in Parliament. So that becomes much trickier for them. So their default is that we should put new councils together using existing buildings of the existing councils. That's important for you because down the road you've got Newlands, which effectively runs up to the car park for Waterlooville Town Centre. So you would think, well, it would make sense to have that new urban area involved in that. Well, that might be the case, but it does involve a much more complex route to these new councils than it would do if you were keeping Winchester City Council area whole and all those parishes the same. There's an additional bit that is complex about that. Southampton are very interested in taking the southern parishes of my area. So that's Chilworth and Nursling and Rownhams, and they want Romsey. Good luck trying to get people at Romsey to join Southampton. But the point with that again would be, it's a big job for them to begin to break those areas away, and frankly, a lot of those people don't want to join Southampton. So there's an enormous amount of conversation yet to be had around that. The initial plans do not split districts. That's the initial principle, and then if areas want to suggest that the district boundaries should be crossed and changed, that will be the case. I can tell you now that Portsmouth are very keen that should happen, because the obvious creation of a council around Portsmouth, a greater Portsmouth if you want, would be Havant, Fareham, Gosport and Portsmouth, a southeastern bit. But this is where it begins to get important that you think about the money aspect of it. Because if you're putting Portsmouth with Fareham, Gosport and Havant, in Gosport you've got some of the most deprived areas of the county. You've also got that in Lee Park in Havant. So you're putting really quite deprived areas in one corner of the county altogether. In the same way that you might put Eastleigh with Southampton. Well, Eastleigh has a debt of 552 million. They've borrowed 552 million to buy land, to invest in various things, but that debt pretty much uses up much of the income of their council. And Southampton have got major financial challenges as well, just like the county council have. They've got for the same reasons, but they've got another big looming issue, which is that they own all of their own council housing. And you know when you get one of the energy efficiency ratings on your house, where it's A through to E, the government has said that all rented homes have to have efficiency standard C by 2030. Virtually none of Southampton's council housing reaches that standard. And the cost of having to improve it to that standard will run into hundreds of millions. So there are challenges around all of this. Whoever gets the New Forest is going to get lots of lovely countryside, ponies, and old people. I don't see that sounds flippant, but it is actually a challenge because disproportionately more older people live along the coast in the New Forest than they do in the rest of the county. Whoever gets Basingstoke gets an enormous amount of business rate income. So putting all of these different blocks together in such a way that it works is really challenging. And then you've got that issue of place. Do you feel connected to the area that you're going to be with? If you wanted to get a council of about 500 or 1,000 people, you would have to take all of East Hampshire, all of Winchester City, all of Test Valley, and even then, you'd only just be at 400,000. So you'd need to take the New Forest maybe as well. That would take you to about 550,000 people. But that council would run from Barton-on-Sea next to Christchurch, all the way up to Borden, just south of Farnborough, across to here, up to Highclere, just short of Highclere. That would be a huge area. Would you feel connected with it? Maybe not. The converse argument of that is, your roads are fixed by Hampshire County Council, your children are educated by Hampshire County Council, and you are looked after in old age by Hampshire County Council, which runs from Farnborough to Highclere, to Barst-on-Sea, to Rowlands Castle and to Emsworth. So, would you want your planning done by that council though? Probably not. Because you'd want to know that whoever's making those decisions locally knew your area. You wouldn't want somebody you wouldn't want me from Romsey making a decision as to what planning applications were being decided in your own patch. So there are lots of different conflicting sort of challenges there. But when you come back to that issue of money, when you come back to that issue of paying for social care, the challenges I was explaining to begin with, that's the most important thing, because whatever we do, I feel really strongly that we need to create councils that are sustainable, that they're resilient, that they can withstand any kind of challenges that come along from financially. Because there's no point just creating new councils who are going to be straight into that same problem. And in fact, all of the stuff that Winchester City Council does for you, all the stuff that Paul and her colleagues do at the City Council, is good stuff. They do a lot of good work that, frankly, in the community in particular, frankly, the County Council couldn't afford to do, because we are completely focused. 90% of our budget almost either goes on education, children's social care, or adult social care. An ever-increasing proportion of that is eaten up by it. So, it's important to make sure they're sustainable, because all the good things that Winchester City Council currently do for you otherwise have to go because they get eaten up by that cost of social care. So there's a bit of a journey yet. There will be public consultation about it, about the initial plans over the summer. There is no decision yet as to whether it should be 3 or 4, what boundaries they should be, or how it should look. There is a debate to be had about whether areas are able to be split up. Portsmouth are keen to get the southern parishes of Winchester or the southern parishes of East Hampshire, frankly because I think they look at it and they can see that there is those deprived areas are coming into them, so they want to have areas that have a stronger council tax base to support them. But that is not decided, it is not a given, and I know that there is a really strong feeling amongst a lot of the leaders in the particularly the leaders of the 3 central districts of Test Valley, Winchester and East Hampshire, that shouldn't happen. You know here that you're within Winchester City Council area. Winchester might be further away than Portsmouth, but on the other hand, you're happy, I presume. But our general sense is that people are happy being in the areas in which they live, and therefore putting them together to still keep some of those areas together is really important in terms of giving a sense of place. So big change coming. I should explain the timeline. The timeline is a bit longer. The likelihood is that we make an initial proposal in September. Realistically, I think there are probably going to be 2 or 3 different ideas put in. The government will choose one of them. Then the work will begin to create those councils. The first elections to them are likely to be held in May 2027. That's when you will elect what's called a shadow council. So that council that you've elected, those people will have the job of establishing the council, employing the senior staff, deciding the constitution, getting everything ready, and then the councils themselves go live in April 2028. That's the point at which me and Patricia, we're out of a job, because the county council goes. Well, that's assuming we win next year, but you know, if we would no longer be here. Paula would no longer be a Winchester City Councillor at that point. Winchester City Council goes, the county council goes, and a new council comes into being, with those people elected in 2027 having spent the year getting it ready, and they then carry on for a 4-year term. Does that make sense? It's a bit complicated, I'm very sorry. It's also something about which politicians can go on for ages and bore you silly. But I hope that was helpful.
That was a very, very quick run through, but very informative. Thank you. I mean, it seems to me that the issue is the population size versus the economic and the social factors, as well as the location, but also taking into consideration cultural considerations. Denmead has more in common with Winchester and the other southern parishes than we do with the urban areas of Portsmouth. So there are significant challenges that we're facing. What a job.
And you will have your say, that's the important thing. You will be able to have your say on what you think, if they do propose that there should be any changes at that time. But I'm happy to ask a good question.
So Nick has very kindly said that he is more than happy to take questions. So, so the lady at the front here first, and then I can talk back, sir.
That was really helpful, and I wouldn't use the word sense necessarily, but it makes sense when you said John Baker. Thank you. Just going back to the principle of devolution, leaving aside all the learning fetch-up and all the rest of it, it sounds like the County Council thinks it's generally a good idea. Has it been decided that there will be the devolution?
Yes.
Yes, that's already been decided. And then, given that because I think all the forums of this, like the famous, the Manchesters and all of those kind of things, were built around big kind of accommodation stuff, weren't they? And you described some of the challenges the County Council got. In your view, how realistic is it that someone who's a mayor is going to be able to balance it? Because I would suspect that the issues, as you suggested, in Portsmouth, are very, very different to what they're facing to another area. So it just feels to me like you could be spending all of your time trying to get some consensus of something across 2 million people. Some live in the country, some live in the cities. Is it going to really get anywhere?
I think so. There are examples of, particularly in the northeast actually, where there's that combination of rural areas with sort of more urban areas. So Tees Valley is one. Sort of the Northumberland, that northeastern mayoralty, Yorkshire and North Yorkshire, York and North Yorkshire is another, where they managed to balance it. I think I'd probably use the example of the Police and Crime Commissioner. So you've got Donna, Police and Crime Commissioner, and she manages to balance all the different pressures that there are. Rural crime, city centre crime, stuff that happens on the island. And her job is to make sure that there is a focus on each of those different things and have a plan that does that. And the mayor will have need to have the same kind of focus. And sorry, I talked about there being a combined authority. A combined authority isn't a new council, nobody else. The only additional person elected is a mayor, and the mayor effectively is replacing the Police and Crime Commissioner, so no additional person being elected. But the mayor chairs the combined authority, and the combined authority comprises representatives of the council areas. The proposal currently is that there be 2 from the county council area and 1 each from the 3 unitaries, Island, Portsmouth, Southampton. The districts and boroughs in the county area feel that that's too little representation of the county, and this is the government saying what should happen rather than us. We have 1.4 million people. The other 3 combined have 700,000. So, effectively they have 3 seats, we have 2, and we've got twice the population. So that could yet change, and I think that has an impact upon how it eventually runs and how it's shared out. The one thing I would say, and the one thing that we were thinking about how this should work, is that we felt really strongly, I feel really strongly, that what we should be doing is saying to whoever is the mayor and whoever runs that combined authority that our focus must be on the areas of deprivation, be they in the cities or be they in the county council area. There's deprivation, as I'm sure you all know, in rural areas just as much as there is in New Park or in Central Gosport. Because if we can tackle those challenges, we all win. We decrease the pressure on our services, we decrease the pressure on the council services, and we make people economically active, we improve their lives, and we have people who contribute to the whole. And so that, I think, is the focus that we should have. That doesn't mean that there's an immediate focus on the urban areas to the detriment of the rural areas, but I think it does mean that we need to be cognizant of the fact of where that benefit lies, frankly. And that's not, that's my honest opinion of how actually you don't have to directly do stuff for us in the rural areas, because I live in an area like this as well.
You find some common issues.
You do, yes, absolutely, yeah. But by helping some of those other areas, then you do help us in the long run. So, does that help?
Thank you. Gentleman at the back.
Thank you. I'm going to be greedy. I've got two questions actually. The first question is, can we assume that Portsmouth and Southampton will continue to exist, albeit with some extra areas included within them?
So, the short answer is yes. I mean, they are. If you look at the individual, so the county council is kind of over everybody, isn't it, in our area? But if you look at them, they are the two primary urban areas. They are, and they have a focus in terms of employment and economy, which probably means that they are the centre of two new councils. The lines around them grow outwards. Whether they're called Greater Portsmouth or South East Hampshire or Greater Southampton or South West Hampshire, who knows? But I think we can be pretty certain that they continue. There's a piece as well to explain, is something about the fact that upper tier councils, be they unitary or counties, have certain powers vested in them by legislation that give us the ability, for example, to decide that a protection order needs to be made for a child. So the Director of Children's Services is able to sign off on that. That's a statutory duty they have, and they can delegate that power to a social worker to undertake that, or to deprive liberty from somebody, or to step in when care is needed. That's not something that districts and boroughs have. And the government talk about having anchor councils. What they mean by that are they're the councils that have those powers. So the county council as a body would transform itself into one of those continuing councils, as would Portsmouth and Southampton, because you wouldn't otherwise want to constitute those powers again.
The other point is what you said, everything will be done by 2028. That seems a rather tight timeline.
Yeah.
Rather ambitious.
Yeah.
Ambitious as in ambitious enough set to fail, or ambitious?
Yeah. Honest answer, yes. I think there's a bit of me. There's an awful lot that could go wrong. There's an awful lot. And I'd rather that it goes wrong in the way that we can't agree, we end up with a situation where no one can agree, it's a mess, the government don't really know what to do, and their attention moves elsewhere because something else happens in the world. And I would put the chances of that happening probably at about 20% at the minute. I think there is I think the greater risk is that everything is rushed, and it's rushed in such a way that we end up with exactly in that situation I was explaining that we should avoid, where we're just making councils for the sake of them, and that they're not going to be sustainable, they're not going to be able to cover their responsibilities, they're going to have the same kind of financial challenges that we all currently have, and there's not an honest conversation with government that says we are just setting ourselves up to fail. And my view very firmly is that if it looks like that's happening, we should just say, no, we're not doing any more until such time as you sort this out for us. And there's probably the easy solution for government is to reset council tax at the time of those new councils being established. Now, whether they'll do that, because remember 2028 is May 2028 will be probably not much more than a year ahead of the next general election. Possibly more. If I can make so, I'm kind of, you should understand I'm not of their party, but if I can say that I think the biggest disappointment that I've had, there have been quite a number of things that you might look at and go, that's not been great, of the last few months since the general election. With a majority that size, they had a chance to do something about social care, and they've kicked it into a Royal Commission. And so we are not going to have a solution until after the next election, if at all. And that, I think, is a massive, massive loss to us all, because a party that had won a majority of that size, almost 200, could have done something differently, and could have moved us to a compulsory insurance system or something of that kind that would have begun to actually change how it works, because we otherwise are condemning ourselves to wait for an outcome that will probably tell us what we know we need to do anyway. So it's a bit of a political point, but you know, I think it's an opportunity lost.
Can I possibly make a point now?
Yeah.
Last week I was at a meeting at the Southern Parishes group. One of the members sat there as a parish clerk who was involved in the last local government reorganisation in 1974. And she said that one took 7 years and it still didn't work properly when it was finished. Those of you who remember it well, possibly. I don't know. So, yeah, the question is it feasible by 28? Yeah.
It's a really, really good one.
Yeah.
And they've got to find parliamentary time to do it. You know, and stuff happens, doesn't it? Other stuff comes along. And so, you know, genuinely, you could have me back in 5 years' time saying, what happened to that then? And I'm going, yeah, because it could take that long. But they're pretty determined, I've got to say. And we met with Jim McMahon, who is the local government minister, a couple of weeks ago in Southampton. And he was really quite clear. And one of the things that perhaps was heartening about him being quite clear was that he was really, he was not keen at all on the idea of splitting districts. He was not keen on that idea, but he was very firm in saying, this is the timeline, you're on this road. And I think you know, and in order to be on this route, you know, our expectation is that you meet these various points along the way that we're setting you. We want your submission by September. We'd said, could we have a bit longer because we've got loads to do with devolution, can't we have till November? And he was like, no. You've signed up to this, we want your submission by September, and we should be able to do it all because we're giving you a template to use devolution against. So, which is fair enough. You know, we did sign up to that part of it. So.
Thank you. Gentleman in the second row.
I just wonder what sort of mayor or what sort of person would want the mayor's job?
Not me. So there's one big candidate who is the person who is otherwise losing her job. So that's Donna. I think if you look at who has been selected elsewhere, I think you want a big personality, frankly, because you want somebody to be able to kind of, you know, bang the table and fight up a corner. It doesn't necessarily need to be a politician. It could be somebody who has a profile in business or in, you know, something like that. I think the mayors, to my mind, who are less successful and don't seem to get as much for their areas are those who, frankly, are local politicians who are just, it's my time up, isn't it? Don't worry. My kids do that to me, but they forward me telling them off about something. They'll just set me an alarm. ones, you know, when you've got a council leader who suddenly become the council leader, who suddenly become the mayor, and they treat it like they're still the council leader. And that's not what you need. You need somebody who is going to be out there and go, hang on, I'm Hampshire, so we want this. Because that's the forum in which they're going to be.
Surely it's got to be somebody that lives in South Kent's area.
Or Northants.
Or North.
But somebody, they must live within the area. That's a requirement of it. And that's why there's been a controversy over the elections going on in Lincolnshire at the moment. One of the candidates doesn't live there. Has been found not to be living there. And you should live within the area in which you're going to represent. I feel really strongly about that. I think it's not really appropriate for people to represent an area in which they don't live. Because if you don't do that, how do you know what's going on? You know, how do you know what your community thinks? So that's really important. I think it's about them setting out their stall as well. They need to have a vision. They need to be able to say, this is where I think we should be in 10 years' time. Because it's not an administrative job, this one. My job is relatively administrative. My job is to make sure that the potholes are filled as quickly as we possibly can.
They're not getting on with their work.
I'm doing terribly. You should have worked for me next year. Because it's very little money on social care, but it's you know, that people are looked after, that the most vulnerable people know that we are there, that they can rely upon us when that time comes, when they need our help. That happens effectively, and efficiently, and kindly. And that job is not the mayor's job. So it's a different job. It's strategic. You've got to have that vision that says, this is where I think we should be. This is what we should be getting for our area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Could I start slightly differently to everybody else and just give a big thank you from Denmead to your road team. They closed the road, Hampden Road, from the boundary with Havant Borough Council, Waterville, and came right through to the first roundabout. They relayed the whole road, and it really is nice to drive on what used to be a Hampshire road. No bumps, no holes, or anything. Absolutely super. I was horrified on the Thursday night when I was coming back from the Parish Council meeting in Newlands to see a road gang a week after they finished starting work. I took a ride along there the next day. They must have been just fixing a manhole cover. I was getting worried we were doing a trench straight. About 10, 15 years ago, it was mooted from on high that parish councils may well be, well, they were asked if they would consider taking on additional responsibilities. I can see devolution going down this track again. Where do you think parish and town councils will be? This is obviously something that's going to happen after 2028. Where do you say they're going to be? Because there's a lot of borough councils and district councils that have their own civil mayoralty. Winchester obviously wants to retain it as much as possible because it's the oldest mayoralty in England, second only to London. But Fareham, Havant, all got their own mayoralties. They won't exist as a district or borough council. So they're going to have to form into where I think they're going to be town councils and do it that way.
So there's quite a bit there. The first thing, I'm sorry to correct you, Mike, but it's not devolution, it's local government organisation.
Well, yes.
So that's just because it gets muddled up, and I understand why it's muddled up. So the government started off saying parish councils got to be part of this. They then created a consultation that had no mention of parish councils at all in it. I think there is an expectation that parishes should take on more, and if you're creating a council that runs from here to Barton-on-Sea, to Highclere, to boredom, then parish councils are going to be really important because they're going to be the most local sense of council that you'll have, the most local unit of council that you'll have. There's a lot of talk about how there should be some transfer of assets from the districts and boroughs. You know, I don't know whether the city council owns any of the local play areas or.
No play areas.
Right.
They do own the car park and the toilets. In the
So you might get the car park and the toilets offered to you, for example. But with that might come income. It might be a free car park.
It's a free car park.
Okay, no income. But it comes with cost and responsibility, doesn't it?
Yes.
You've got to fix the toilets, you've got to keep them
£2,000 a
clean,
year.
you've got to fix any potholes in the car park. You know, how are you going to maintain that? And I think, you know, there is a sense that the parishes aren't limited in terms of how they change their precept, and so you just increase your precept. And that's why, actually, in Eastleigh, they created sort of big parishes by merging them quite a few years ago. And in many places, the parish precept is greater than the borough's precept in some of the Eastleigh parishes. So that's one way, but and you're lucky in the sense that you're of a size where you are able to employ some staff to be able to operate all the things that you have to do locally. If you think about, I'm sure you've got some other parishes in your area. In my area, I've got a parish called Buckholt. It has a population of 270. They meet once a year. West Tivoli, East Tivoli, East Dean, West Dean. They're all small parishes, and you'd have to kind of merge them all together, be able to have the capacity to be able to pay somebody to do that kind of work. They do a great job organising the local staff and you know, fixing things and putting the speed sign up and doing things like that. But that's all they're really set up to do. So I think there is a huge role for parishes. That you have to think really carefully though about how you manage them and how you support them. I think there's a really important bit about all of you guys who are parish councillors here. My hat off to you because you do it all for free. And you spend a lot of time doing stuff without any reward and probably lots of people moaning at you. I at least get a bit of money for doing what I do. And so, you know, I think we've got to think about how that model works and think about ways by which we can better incentivise people to step up and do their part, because there will be inevitably more to do. The mayoralties, so before I moved to Hampshire, I lived in Bournemouth, and I was a Bournemouth councillor. I wasn't there when they created Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. I have a lot of friends who are still there, and what they did with each of the traditional mayoralties was to create what they call charter mayors. So if a mayor has been established by a charter, and all of the local mayors that have done, obviously Winchester has, but also Test Valley's mayor, Fairham's mayor, Portsmouth's, Southampton's, Havant's. All of those posts still remain, and what happens in Bournemouth and Poole and Christchurch is that the councillors elected out of Bournemouth meet as what are called the charter trustees, and they then choose one of them to be the mayor each year. The problem is that there are far fewer councillors, so you end up with the same person coming around to be mayor quite a few times, but those mayoralties remain. The really interesting challenge, and that actually comes to, if you were to, say you created that council that says Portsmouth, Havant, Fareham, Gosport, none of those four boroughs, that city and those three boroughs, has parishes. So if you're taking Newlands and Denmead and going, here we are, you go over there, you'd be the only two parishes. And that, I think, is a huge challenge. And I do think that the areas that there are four boroughs that aren't parished, those three plus Rushmore, which is the Aldershot, Farnborough area, I think they do need to think about parishing, because they otherwise won't have any link to local communities in that way. And that's a issue for them, but it's something that does create at least a level of local government that's close to.
Thank you. Gentleman in the front.
That ties in very nicely with my question. I'm an interloper. I've come across the border from Waterloo.
Okay.
And I've recently moved to Waterloo about a few months ago. And as an aside, I'd like to say Unitaries is not something to be scared of. So I've done that in Wiltshire. I was a Wiltshire County Councillor. and Wiltshire Councillor thereafter, and it worked very well for us, and we've got a balanced budget. Wiltshire got a balanced budget now and doing very well, thank you. And like a lot, like Wiltshire, struggling financially. But my question in terms of Havant and Waterloo is how do we go down the process of creating town councils? Because at the moment it's quite a difficult process to go through. You have to go through a petition, getting 7.5% of the population, or the electorate, to support it, to go to Havant, to then make a decision of how to go forward. Now we're going through all this sort of process, and you've got a whole swathe of different Havant plots parishing. Surely there must be a mechanism to make this happen easier and quicker.
So, actually, my neighbours from my area next door are Richard and Zoe Kluwer. So Richard Kluwer is the guy who's the leader of Wiltshire. And Wiltshire is a perfect example where they had, I think it's fair to say, they had a tricky first few years, didn't they, when it was all created. But it's now settled to the point where you can see the benefits of having a bigger kind of county-wide council. And you're absolutely right, they increased their council tax by 3% this year? 4.5%.
We wanted to go 3%, but the government took away all the government grants
for the rural, So, there's actually a relatively straightforward way to do it. So, if you want to kind of create something yourself from your community, you've got to get that petition and everything going. But actually, the responsibility for establishing parishes or for changing parish governance lies entirely with district or borough or city council level. And all they do is enact what's called a local government review. And in doing so, they can move parish boundaries, they can increase or decrease the size of parish councils, they can merge parishes. Test Valley did it about 5 years ago, just before the pandemic. And I applied to move our house from Romsey Extra into Heybridge, where we live, because we were one of those anomalies. Somebody built a house that was actually just the wrong side of the track, and I therefore had to drive 5 miles to go and vote rather than walk up the road 200 yards. It was that kind of thing. And so you make all of those little amendments, but you can equally establish parishes by doing that. And I think that's what those boroughs need to do as some of their final acts, to create those parishes and to do that sort of thing. It's a relatively easy, it's a straightforward thing to do. It involves lots of public engagement, of course. It involves you beginning to establish, what they look like, but it's not impossible by any means. And I think it's something that should be worthwhile looking at. Is there any question?
I was just going to ask about the mayor of Winchester. If you can carry on, but you answered that.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is that when you talk about parishes, Winchester doesn't have a parish council. So the central Winchester doesn't have a parish council. They're just looked after by the city council.
Yeah, they have a town forum.
They have a town forum, but it's not. Nor does Basingstoke. Andover didn't have one until 12 years ago. Then they created one. So there are still bits of the existing districts and boroughs that don't have parishes.
Is it yet known how funding will work? Will the mayor bid for money, or will government just dish it out, or how will it be?
So the mayor will be given money by government.
Yeah.
So they'll be given grant money, the money that goes with some of those decision-making powers that are currently made in Westminster and decided by Westminster comes down to the mayor. They also get a settlement. That settlement is a 20-year settlement that gives a bunch of money across that period as well. When there was a suggestion a few years ago that should be the case, it sounds a lot of money, but when you split it out over 20 years, it's not. We were offered, I think, 600 million, but that works out to be 30 million a year, which actually isn't a lot. But then it's the other stuff. It's the other stuff that comes with it. The mayor can also raise their own precept, but that precept is only for the things that they do themselves, and they don't actually have lots of stuff to do themselves. So it should be great. Because the police and fire budgets get folded into it, so it becomes a different kind of beast. And they also can raise their own levies against developers to pay for major infrastructure and to build a pot for major infrastructure. So which is a good thing. So if you think about, wanting to do things with, and one of the things that I really hope that they take, whoever is the mayor takes, is that they begin to get better control, better influence over what national highways do with the motorway and encouraging networks.
Yeah, because it's all that infrastructure stuff that's very long term.
Exactly that, yeah. And you've got to build pots to do that because it's all really expensive stuff. The Junction 10, well, it's costing
I'm
£100.
thinking particularly of things like, with all the development is making the companies put in, proper drainage and stuff too.
Exactly.
So all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sort of stuff.
Yeah. I think that still stays with the councils, actually. That level of stuff still stays with the councils. But I think the mayor will be given the job of overseeing the delivery of new housing numbers. And if you know that they've all gone up enormously in the last few years, I suspect that means that they'll be pointed at delivering the new villages and new towns that they'll want. And that probably means Mitchell together. It's the obvious one because it's got a railway station. It's close to the motorways. They have to build probably a better junction or a new junction to serve that. So that's where that kind of money comes in.
So
I'm not
I've
saying
got
it's a good idea, by the way. It's probably where it's going to
follow on from that then. So at the moment, I think Winchester holds about £18 million of community infrastructure levy funding.
Yep.
What's going to happen to that? Because Winchester are no longer going to exist. So where is that money that's been collected from all of the housing development?
So
where is that going to go?
if you assume that Winchester stays whole,
Yeah.
the city council area stays whole, goes with Test Valley, for example, that goes in together into that new council area with East Hampshire, Test Valley, Winchester. And so equally they've got Sill, and that'll all be kind of going to the same pot. I would assume that whoever is the leader, whoever is doing the negotiation from Winchester side, so Martin, or Phil, who's the leader in Test Valley, there should be something that says the legacy Sill funding needs to be used within the area in which it was originally raised. It's the same thing about local plans. So local plans cover your area at the minute. Winchester have just submitted their Regulation 19. And until such time as the new council that covers your area comes up with its own local plan, your local plan still governs what happens within your area, even though you may no longer be Winchester City Council area. Does that make sense? That's what they did in Winchester.
So next question on that then. So at the moment, Winchester are the planning authority.
Yes.
And if Winchester no longer exists and we've got outstanding enforcement cases in Denmead, we've got quite a lot of planning breaches. Where is that going to go?
That just becomes a legacy thing. So your planning enforcement team at Winchester City Council doesn't disappear. They carry on doing their day-to-day job. This is the really important thing. I think it's really, so I didn't mention it largely because as an audience, in a way, you're not the audience, you're not as interested in it. County Council employs 37,000 people. Each of those people is reliant upon their job with the council for their income, for their livelihood. And it's really important for those people to know that they are valued, that they are, and that their job is valued, and that they will continue to stay in that job. There are some, of course, that will go, but they tend to be, if you're putting together 11 different councils, or 15 different councils into 4 or 5, then you don't need 4 chief execs, you don't need 4 heads of legal, you don't need 4 HR directors, you don't need, but you still need social workers. You're not making savings amongst your social workers, you're not making savings from the people who work on the roads, you're not making savings in your planning teams. There is no spare capacity in the Winchester planning team as there isn't in East Hampshire or in Test Valley or in Portsmouth or in Fairmont. all those people will still continue to work in their jobs and still do things. It's just that all of that stuff still happens. It's just badged differently. Mid Hampshire Council or Heart of Hampshire Council or whatever they want to call it. The really important bit actually in all of this, if you're merging all this stuff together and creating new councils, is the back office stuff. So on day one, it's not so much about the social worker, because the social worker knows that they've got their caseload of people they need to go and look after and that they go and do their job. And it doesn't matter whether they're working for for Hampshire one day and Greater Portsmouth the next. They're still going out and doing whatever they do. But the really important stuff is that when you, on day one, notice that there is something wrong with the child next door that's continually crying and not being soothed, when you ring up the call centre to say, I'm worried about this child, that message goes through, the IT systems work to be able to transfer the message to the right social worker, they get to the right place, that social worker knows where to go. And that is the huge challenge. And that social worker then at the end of the month is paid the right amount of money from the right system into the right bank account. It's that kind of, in business, I've merged we had a business and we bought one of our competitors. And that was the biggest challenge, making sure that everything worked, all of the back office stuff worked. It's a huge issue.
Any further questions, gentlemen?
You mentioned you're putting the submission in September, and there will be some form of public consultation. Will we be able to have a vote or consultation on the options, if there are more than one option, and the names of these councils, etc.?
I suspect the names come later once we decide the areas, but otherwise, yeah, there'll be something that says the proposal is that there'll be different versions, I suspect. So unfortunately, it's not like Wiltshire where the population equals about the right size. So Winchester, East Hampshire, and the three northern districts, Basingstoke, Hart, Rushmore. That might be one option. Another one might be the three middle ones. Another one might be Winchester with Fareham and Eastleigh and Southampton. Or whatever it might look like, there'll be different versions like that, and there should be the opportunity for you to say, we have an affinity with Winchester, and particularly, definitely if they are beginning to split up the districts, that's when really it's going to be important for the local areas to have their say and say we do or we don't want to go with this particular configuration or not.
Sorry, can I just quickly ask, and when you say there should be, how does that information come out? Did I
So-
just happen to see this on Facebook?
No.
Then I won't know.
Yeah, no, so follow me on Facebook. But more importantly, there's stuff about kids and Bromsey. That's something that should be coming, that number one, we have all committed to doing across the piece. So everybody will be doing it through their normal council communications. But also Winchester City Council in particular would be looking at that. So what I can tell you now is that we are already preparing in Test Valley that if there is a proposal for Chilworth, Nursling and Round, North Baddesley, Ampfield and Freshfield and Bromsey to go into Southampton, there'll be a referendum of people.
Could I also interject? Please do look at my official webpage, In Touch with Winchester Southern Parishes, because after all the consultations, all the latest information up there, right? In Touch with Winchester Southern Parishes. And that's where you'll find whatever information I've got, any links to any consultations, etc.
Patricia does Facebook as well.
Any further questions?
I think I've bored you into submission.
Okay, well, I'd just like to say thank you so much. That's been really, really informative. And thank you so much for your time. I know that we had a small section on the agenda for you, and you were very generously given us
I've got on for a long time.
No, it's so very much appreciated.
Do you mind, I said I'd try and get back to one of my parish councils.
Of course, absolutely,
Would you mind if I
not at all.
disappear? Sorry for being rude and going, but...
No, not at all. Thank you so much for coming. on to the chairman's report. I will keep it reasonably brief because I'm sure you don't want to hear me coughing. So I am very pleased to welcome you to our meeting this evening, and I will very briefly go through some of the work that the Council's been delivering for you this year. Council continues to receive clear audits with no matters giving cause for concern. We have now employed the services of an accountancy firm, DCK Accounting, and they provide us with on-site monthly accounting support, and they're dedicated to providing a bespoke accounting service, and they work alongside of Jenny, who is our responsible financial officer. They offer their accounting experience and expertise, which has allowed our RFO to reduce her hours and to put in place a forward strategy for the future of the council. Jenny has advised us that in a few years' time she hopes to retire, so we are putting things in place so that we have a very smooth transition, so that we continue with our clear audits and we don't have any hiccups in the road there. We continue to review our policies and processes to deliver best practice, both in managing the team and also the business of council. We've done a lot of work this year on renewing leases to ensure continuity and certainty for people like Denby Community Centre, because the Parish Council owns the community centre, but we lease that in its entirety, the centre and the grounds, to the community centre, and they continue to provide valuable services. I think they have over 50 groups operating on a weekly basis there. And also the lease with Denby Daycare was renegotiated and signed this year. And the work is ongoing with the leases and the agreements with the Scouts and also with the bowling club. Anyone visiting the burial ground will notice how much it's improved since we brought maintenance back in-house. We did outsource the work on the burial ground to Norse. Norse have taken on a lot of contracts, and they weren't able to dedicate the time that we felt was necessary to maintain the burial ground. So we brought maintenance back in-house. We continue to provide free events for the village, including the chicken run, summer party, and you'll see an advert in the report for the summer party this year, and that's on Saturday the 21st of June. We've provided skateboard coaching sessions, a Mugger Open Day, that's the Nottingham's Games area that we've built in Ashling Park. And Katie, who is our events manager, has run a Christmas tree eco-decoration workshop this year. Each year we have the annual act of remembrance, and I was really touched this year when someone told me that they actually travelled from Portsmouth to come to our remembrance service because they like the way that we do our remembrance, our act of remembrance. They love the fact that we have the school children there and that we do the procession from here through the village, and it's attended by members of the church, lots of residents and the Scouts and Guides as well as the children. One of the issues that has been occupying council this year has been the Carpenter's Field development. It was due to have been handed over to the Parish Council, all of the open space land there was due to have been handed over, but it has only just entered its year of maintenance with Winchester City Council, which happens prior to it being handed to the parish. Winchester make sure that everything is as it should be before it's handed over to us, and that is so that we don't incur any costs if the development is not as it should be. So there are some issues which I'm sure people have noticed. There is water pooling on Tanner's Lane from the open space area at the top. I have met with Persimmon in my role as a district councillor and with the officers from Winchester to discuss this with them, and they've agreed that they will be cutting grips, which basically channels from the path into the drainage ditches, because the path was actually acting as a conduit for the water, and that's how the water was all ending up onto the road. So we're hoping that by them doing grips and increasing the bund in the centre of the wetland area, that should help with the water coming onto Tanner's Lane. There is also water coming onto Anmore Road. It's sheeting off of Anmore Green onto Anmore Road, and that is also being addressed. And they think that there is natural springs, and that is possibly causing a lot of the issues with the water. And so they're talking about putting like a wetland pond area in. So it won't just all be grass, there will be a pond area there as well, which will obviously be very good for wildlife. Another thing that Kevin will talk to you about shortly is the revision of the neighbourhood plan. Parish Council believe it's very, very important that we have a neighbourhood plan because that dictates where development in the village will take place. It doesn't say that we don't want development, it says it has to be positive and proactive, and it says we are given the allocation by Winchester, so that says where the development will take place. We did try our best to fight the allocation of between 90 and 100 dwellings. We've been 2 years fighting Winchester on it. Yeah, probably longer than that, because obviously we had all the development at Parklands. We've had 96 additional dwellings at Parklands, and the argument from us was the fact that we've had that is our allocation. Initially Winchester agreed with that and said yes, they put that in writing to us. However, they've been given significantly more allocation, and they've just said, right, so you have to have the additional 100 on top of what you've already got. So we have had 400 dwellings delivered in the last local plan period, and the requirement was 250. But the good news for us is this time round we have only, I say only, we've only been given 100 dwellings, and that's because Councillor Andreoli and myself went through all of the fine print in the documentation from Winchester, and we challenged their numbers. So it's done on a point system. They gave us 43 points and Whiteley had 34 points. So we went through each of the point systems and said, well, we don't have a supermarket. They've given us 3 points for having a supermarket. We have a co-op. They've given us an additional 3 points for having a post office. And we said, well, the post office is in the co-op, so you can't give us 6 points because it's one and the same. So we challenged this. They readjusted our figures. So we were then not put in the same category as Bishop's Waltham. Bishop's Waltham have been given 250, we've been given 100. So we'll take that as a small win. So Kevin will talk a little bit more on the neighbourhood plan. I'm very pleased to see that we have lots of members of the public on the steering group, so it's not just councillors that are working on the neighbourhood plan. There are 3 councillors and 9 members of public. 9 residents are on the neighbourhood plan steering group, which is great. We have done the public consultation on the recommendations from the steering group to council as to where those dwellings should be built, and residents in the village selected the land to the east of Carpenter's Field, north of Anmore Road, to be the site as most sustainable and closest to the village amenities. So we have advised Winchester of that fact. The Parish Council continues to support a number of voluntary organisations through grant funding, and in the last year we have supported Greening Denmead, Citizens Advice, Home Start, Denmead Community Association, Victim Support, Southern Arts Academy, Denmead Horticultural Society, the War Memorial Hall here, Denmead Brass, Denmead Twinning Association, and both Denmead Infant and Denmead Junior School. So we're very pleased to be able to support those organisations in the village. I would also like to thank our staff in this section. We have Jo with us tonight, Jo Clark's full council and the Finance Committee. Excuse me. We have Jenny, who's our responsible financial officer. We have Francis, who's our amenity clerk, Lucy, who's our planning clerk, Liz is our highways and general purposes committee clerk, and we also have the grounds team. Sam is our head groundsman, and we have a team of staff that work under Sam that make the village look beautiful as it is. Flowers are looking fabulous at the moment. They plant an awful lot of bulbs for us, and I think it really makes a good impact in the village. And we also have the 2 village wardens who you probably see walking around the village with the cart, and they do the litter picking. We know that litter is an issue in the village, and we think it's really important that we have staff that go around and do the litter picking. So I would like to very much thank our office staff as well, and I'd also like to thank councillors. You heard Councillor Nick earlier say all parish councillors are volunteers, many here this evening, and I would like to thank them for their time and their commitment to parish council. It isn't always an easy job. We do come in for quite a lot of criticism sometimes, but we do it voluntarily. So I would like to thank my fellow councillors as well. So that concludes the chairman's report. Does anyone have any questions on the chairman's report?
A quick question if I may.
Of course.
The 100 additional properties, is there a timescale that you can anticipate commencing?
There is. At the moment, it's from the end of this neighbourhood plan. This neighbourhood plan runs till 2030. We've been told that no development will take place before 2030. However, that comes with a caveat, because we were told that the housing figures were X to Winchester, and when the new government came in, they said, well, we're not happy with that, we want more houses. They've given a further allocation to Winchester. I think it was 15,000 and it's now up to 24,000 across Winchester. So as soon as Winchester have finished this local plan, they will start on the next one, or the new authority will start on a new plan. Similarly, when we finish this neighbourhood plan, we will have to start on the next one straight away, because we are anticipating that we will be given a further allocation, and government can change the legislation at any point. So at the moment it's from 2030, but if the government say, if you've allocated, you have to build, then the developers will want to build, provided they have capacity. There's no guarantee that the builders actually have capacity to build this many dwellings that quickly. Materials are also an issue as well. So at the moment it's from 2030, but it's, who knows. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you. In which case we will move on to the committee reports, and I will hand over to Councillor Andrioli. Sorry.
Okay, between 1st of April last year and 31st of March this year, the Planning Committee of the Council considered 80 applications. We don't decide them, but we have the right to comment on them on behalf of the village. About 15% of those 80 we disagreed with Winchester on. We don't object to that then, but every single application we put a notification through the letterboxes of neighbours. We often get thanked because neighbours weren't necessarily aware that there was a planning application in their street. We have over the years discovered that Winchester aren't that careful, shall we say. So obviously they're busy because we have a lot. We took 5 of the more contentious applications to the Winchester City Council Planning Meeting, and that's basically ones where for things like development in the countryside or contentious development. And this year we was pleasantly surprised to win 3 of the 5. We don't normally win that many, but in fact some members of the council in the past have said, why do we bother? And I always say, if we don't bother, we'll never win. So it was a pleasant surprise this year. We are continuing to monitor the ongoing Ackwind development proposal. Those of you who keep an eye on it yourselves will know that the Ministry of Defence has stuck an oar in, and we don't know what they've said, but the government has still not decided whether or not to give Ackwind the go-ahead. For those who don't know, we will end up with a huge building to the north of the village overlooking, which will visible from Portstown Hill, but it's the which we will have for 40 years, but it's the digging up of the roads and put the cables through, which will be the main disruption. So we're not hoping that one doesn't go ahead. Since the last annual parish assembly, a change in government has meant that Winchester's local plan has had to be expedited, unless the neighbourhood plan has to try and match it. As reported last year, the parish council tried for more than 2 years to argue that we shouldn't have any allocation, in fact the parish council made a resolution that we would not accept any more housing, but we continue to argue our case with Winchester, and eventually our solicitors advised us that yeah, we put up a good fight, but we didn't know a leg to stand on. So we reluctantly have had to accept the 100. As Paul has already said, Winchester has had to speed up the introduction of their local plan because they've been given a further allocation, which means they have to do their local plan again and allocate more to the parishes and towns in the district. So we are trying to get our neighbourhood plan through as fast as possible, but still doing it properly, obviously. But are expecting further allocation, so we're probably going to end up having to start the next version of the neighbourhood plan almost instantly. One of the major uncertainty over the future is what we've all been hearing about here this evening, is the fact that within a few years we will be under a unitary authority as opposed to under Winchester. What we don't know is whether we'll be under Winchester or Portsmouth or somewhere else. The cynic in me looks at Portsmouth and Hammond, Fairham, Gosport, none of whom have any building space. And to the north of them are the southern parishes of Winchester district, which are green. So, again, yeah. Draw your own conclusions. I have my concerns. I'd like to extend my thanks to Councillor Jones, who has been my vice chairman for this year. Thank the members of the committee for their contribution, as several of them in this evening. And I'd also like to thank Lucy, my new clerk to the committee, who is also supporting the neighbourhood plan, and Joe, our previous clerk, who left us at Christmas. That's my report. Oops. Boring as it was.
So,
with regards to Aquin, have you had any indication as to when a decision is likely to be?
No, not at all. I mean, there's an officer at Winchester who does a very, very good job of keeping all the parishes and other bodies informed whenever he hears anything. Not that we've heard anything for about 6 weeks or so. And even then it was a case of we're still waiting, we don't know what's going to happen. And of course, even Aquin don't have access to some of the stuff that the MOD have said. So that's kind of made things difficult. Yeah. No. Yeah. When we know, we'll tell you, but we don't. Sorry. Thank you.
Do the figures that you quote with your 3 wins out of the 5, does that include the overturning of the development at the north of the village, outside of the boundary?
Well, no, the one you're referring to, the one that came through a week or so back from the planning inspector.
Yeah.
No, because that's outside of this year. The year I quoted.
Very disappointing.
Well, yes, but that is always the problem with planning. For those who don't realise that if you get planning permission, it's fine, but none of your neighbours can appeal against it or complain. If you get turned down for planning, you can keep going back and again and again and again, and go higher. And that's the one Neil is mentioning. Went to a planning inspector appeal and was accepted by the planning inspector. That was earlier this month. Yeah.
Is that the end of it? Is there any more course of action?
No.
No.
Well, unless somebody thinks they can force a judicial review of the planning inspector's decision, and that would mean trying to find some reason why she made a mistake. And she was extremely thorough and extremely correct. I mean, there were two appeals that she heard. She turned down one and accepted the other. So I don't think there's anything there. And similar applications will undoubtedly come in or go to the planning inspector. So yeah.
We've had other applications within that vicinity
Yeah.
already, which were refused, all on the same basis, but they were all refused on the same basis that they were in the countryside. And now that one has been accepted for 3 dwellings there. We're just waiting for the applications to come back in again.
Yeah. We tried, but we don't know when.
I spoke at length at the planning inspectorate, and I mean, we had a fair hearing. It's just one of those, unfortunately.
A lot of resources into that.
They put a lot of resources into that, yeah. We do what we can.
Thin end of the wedge, then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It is very much the thin end of the wedge, Okay, thank you. Any further questions on the planning report? Okay, in which case we'll move on to the Amenities Committee. Unfortunately, it's me again, I'm afraid. Projects that Amenities were involved in the last year was the building of the multi-use games area. This was a huge project for us as a council. Although we have quite a large precept and we do have 14 staff and 13 councillors, as I say, councillors are volunteers and the staff have a day job to do. And the building of the multi-use games area meant going out to tender, which is a huge process for any government contract. So that was undertaken. And then the actual build of the multi-use games area was overseen by councillors. So when I say that it takes a lot of work from both councillors and staff, I really do mean an awful lot of work. So that is now a fantastic new facility that we have for the village. I've spoken a little bit about Anmore Green and Carpenter's Field. We are due to take over responsibility for the car park soon and also the play area. And once we've received the transfer of land, we will install a children's play area up at Tanner's View. We also hope to put a pétanque court right by the Forest of Beer. So that's another project that's pending. I've mentioned about the water coming onto Tanner's Lane. The ditches were deepened and cleared, and that has helped, but it has not completely solved the problem with the water. So further work is required. But when the open space at the north of the village is transferred to the parish council, we would like to install benches in there so that there's somewhere for people to sit whilst they're enjoying the space. We will also potentially look to dedicate the area as a field in trust, which means that it is protected for the longer term, because then if any future parish council decided they wish to sell it, they have to provide twice that size of space in order to sell any field in trust. So it pretty much ensures long-term protection. The area underneath the little Anmore Green, underneath the oak trees by the Forest of Beer, we would like that area made a little bit more user-friendly. It's very, there's a big dip there. It was originally a ditch. So we'd like that to be a little bit more user-friendly so that people can actually use it. We will sort that when the developer hands that over to us. Planting, the grounds team have spent a lot of the winter planting whips around the village to provide habitat. And in the autumn, they planted the 6,000 spring bulbs that I spent ages going through the catalogue and choosing the bulbs that we were going to have. So they planted wild garlic, wood anemones, bluebells, narcissi and crocus. We also have a licence to cultivate, so a lot of the verges in Denmead are owned by Hampshire County Council, and they don't necessarily have, or they don't have the resources to maintain them as we would like to see them maintained. So we applied for a licence to cultivate, and that meant that we are able to then maintain those areas, and that's how we've managed to plant the bulbs in the verges, because we have the licence to cultivate along Forest Road and Southwark Road. One of the biggest parts of work of this committee is the trees in the village. We are very proud of our trees and we look after them. We have them all mapped onto our Geographic Information System, and we enter any work that we do on the trees onto the Geographic Information System, because we then use that as evidence for insurance companies. So if someone makes a claim to say that our trees are causing subsidence because they haven't been maintained, we can go back and say, look, they have been maintained on a regular basis, and really it's to try and protect the trees so that we don't have to chop them down. Anyone that's driven down Forest Road, you will see big stretches where there are no trees. We've had to take them out because of subsidence claims. Unfortunately, when that estate was built, the developer put in the wrong types of trees too close to the houses, and the insurance companies say, just take it out, we're not going to defend the claim, you just have to remove the trees. So that's very unfortunate, but we have lost a lot of our trees, especially along Forest Road, and also there's been ash dieback. So we are looking to plant more trees where we can in the village, provided obviously they're not going to be too close to houses, and we're therefore careful which species of tree we also plant. That concludes my Amenities Committee report. Does anyone have any questions on the work of amenities?
Not a question, it's actually a correction. The trees on the north side of Forest Road were actually put in by Winchester City Council, and it was their design idea that put them in, not the developers. Sorry.
Oh dear. Thank you, Winchester. Any further questions? Okay, thank you. In which case we'll move on to highways. Councillor Brown.
Good evening, everyone. You'll have to excuse me taking glasses on and off. I had contact lenses in all day and my eyes are tired now, and I was on the same holiday as my wife. Highways and General Purposes Committee look after various things in the village, from the lighting for a private finance initiative. We do Christmas trees in the village centre, bus shelters, the waste bins that are around the village, that are the green bins that are on council land. We pay 50% towards the public toilets, which are in the centre of the village by the car park. We also put up the speed limit reminder signs to remind everyone that the village has a central village has a mainly 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. We also look after signs in the greenways and maintain the bollards that are on highways land in the centre of the village. Some of the bollards are excuse me, are owned by the shops themselves. As has been said, we look after the burial ground as well, which we've taken on a large project of resurfacing Cemetery Lane and sorting out the car park and turning circle. I was ashamed that the Cemetery Lane was so potholed that if it was your last journey going down there, it should have been a smooth one and not full of potholes. But it's something we wanted to get done and have finally got done. We are also preserving the heritage in the village through the finial rings and finger posts that you'll see. We are just about to, hopefully very soon, put one up at Forest Gate. It's missing, but we worked out that there should have been one there, and we've put the appropriate destinations and distances on the fingers to let you know where the directions go to. For the burial ground, we are running out of space. We are trying to purchase more land for a burial ground. It's becoming very hard to find land, and we probably have potentially 10 years left in the burial ground as we are. That's if we have the rate of burials as they are at the moment. If it comes to the times when we can't find anywhere, we would have to close the burial ground because we would have no more space to put anyone in. It's not something the council wants to do, but obviously if we, sorry, my voice is going as well, if we can't find anywhere else to have another burial ground, that will be the outcome, unfortunately. We are, sorry, I'm losing my point there. Are there any questions on the highways report?
As far as the speed, the data for the speed camera, are we making any progress with?
No, unfortunately that camera hasn't been up for a period of time due to 2 incidents of vandalism with it. It should be up very soon again because now we're getting the longer days, so the camera is solar panel powered, so that it needs daylight to be able to charge it, otherwise it goes flat within a few hours and doesn't recharge.
So isn't there an issue with the data being admissible?
The police don't want to take the data. Basically they feel they will be overwhelmed by the data that they get from it. We are trying to yes, through Safer Neighbourhoods, which also comes under this committee, Safer Neighbourhoods panel. We have had the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, and they are trying to push for the data to be accepted by the police. I sit there and because it has to be, every speeding incident has to be verified, and I sit there normally and spend a few hours a day confirming registrations and things and sending the information in. But at the moment, they don't want to take the data.
So we're still trying.
We are still trying, yes. Just as a final note, and if anyone doesn't have any more questions, I'd like to thank Gary, who's my Vice Chair of Highways, and the members of Highways Committee, and my new clerk, who is Liz, who is doing an exceptional job at the moment, coming into a new role and is learning the job very fast and is working very hard.
Does anyone have any final questions, general questions? Okay, well, in which case I'd like to thank you all very much for coming this evening, and I will close the meeting. Thank you.